So we are now going to page 20 of your application guide. This is project selection criteria number 4, community-based planning. I do want to remind you to please use the chat feature for all of your questions. We know that you're going to have a lot. It may be a good idea to hold on to your questions until towards the end, just as we may answer them as we go along. So we will cover COVID-19 guidance during this criteria, as well as whether or not meetings you did in the past qualify for round 4. And then after reviewing pages 20 through 23, Cedric will share some additional guidance about community-based planning during this unique time that we're in. So the paragraph on the top of page 20 summarizes the 3 steps of this criteria. A is about when and where your meetings were scheduled. B is about how you invited youth, families, and seniors from the project area to design the park. And C is about how the interactive park design process, which includes the residents' ideas. So here on page 20, the goal for this scoring chart under Part A is to have 5 meetings in the project's community, with at least 2 of those meetings during evenings or weekends. Part B on page 21, this scoring chart covers how the residents were notified of those meetings and if a broad representation, meaning youth, families, and seniors, were involved in those meetings. And then if you turn to page 22, this part C looks at what happened during those meetings. There are 3 design goals, as you see here on page 22, and then page 23 does show you how you score points for each of those design goals. So we are now going to turn to page 59 for examples, and this is the technical assistance section for criteria number 4. Thank you, Sam. So page 59 shows guidance for Part A, and these are some examples of creative meeting ideas. Page 60 is for Part B, and this page provides some ideas and methods for inviting a broad representation of residents. Page 61 provides additional guidance for reaching the 3 goals listed in C for your meetings. So if you could please turn now to the questions and answers document. Again, this is on our webpage. Thank you, Sam. So we're going to go straight here to number 9. This is what discusses applying for the same project site that you applied for in round 3. So if you were applying for the exact same project, and if the meetings that you had did not have any weaknesses, you do not need to hold more meetings, and you can submit the same application with the 4 required updates shown here underneath Part A. If you are applying for the same project site, but a different scope, then you may need to hold additional meetings. So meetings that happen from June 5th of 2018 on will still receive credit. However, you need to determine if your new scope meets the design goals for criteria 4 using those existing meetings. So how do you determine if you need to have more meetings? So for instance, if you are downscoping your project and you are utilizing those same meetings, you need to ensure that the items that were removed from the round 3 application were lower priority items from the original community input meetings, and you must be able to explain how the meetings you had determined that the items that remain within the round 4 application were the most popular for the community. If you do not know whether those features for round 4 were indeed more desired than others, you should conduct additional community engagement meetings. If you have a different project site altogether, you will need to complete a new application and hold new meetings for this new project site. So coming soon to our website is another really great community-based planning document. So as you see here on your screen, this document is going to provide really great examples, additional details, and photos of different methods for community-based planning that were shared by applicants in round 3. This is going to be a great resource available for you to review, and it should again be available on our website in the next couple of weeks. Finally, we have created a COVID-19 guidance document, which is also on our website. These are unprecedented times, and this document will provide direction about designing parks with residents' ideas while still following COVID-19 health guidelines. Again, please use the chat feature if you have any questions, and Cedric will now share some thoughts about community-based planning. Cedric?
Thank you, Noel. Um, when we first learned that we were going to be having a round 4, um, one of the questions that came back from the public and just in general was, should we still require meetings, and should we still require that engagement portion of the program? Um, After careful thought, we believe we do. And I think it's just want to take a couple of minutes to give you some insight into how our thinking goes and why we believe that contact is going to be important. We recognize that with COVID-19, we are in a very difficult time, very difficult situation. And we really don't know at this point where we'll be by the end of this application deadline. We also know that based on the experience we've had over the last decade with community-based planning, in particular with the last round of um, of, uh, of this particular program, that we saw the community-based planning really yielded some extraordinary projects, and also came forward with new concepts in the way that we engage the public when we are planning programs and projects. Um, After a lot of thought, what we had to do is it comes down to this. We have one, we could decide to do nothing and just move forward without requiring the meetings. Or two, we look at whatever methods we have available to us um, to make certain that that contact continues. If you look at the core of this program, it starts with access. And access to communities that are underserved and part poor in particular. What we saw with SPP in the last rounds, and many people don't know this, but there were of the 478 applications, it represented over 100,000 people statewide meeting in community to discuss their vision for what a park or recreational facility should look like in their community. It also spawned conversations about quality of life and also gave the opportunity for organizations to develop relationships with their public entities as well as nonprofits. And you saw, based on what we received back, communities um, really becoming focused on how they can take ownership and work together to resolve issues within community. With that in mind, what we saw too is first stating that 100,000 people may not seem like a lot within a state of 40 million, but those 100,000 people that had those discussions came from communities that have been neglected for one reason or another, or where the relationships between getting out and talking about the issues and concerns that you have were just not at the level we'd like to see. So what we saw with this whole process is multi-generational meetings taking place, and as a result, projects reflective of the vision of those communities. We believe in our deepest heart that one of two things should happen when you apply for a grant with us. One, you will either receive a grant that's going to be transformative for the community that you're working with, or two, that you civically engage people in a discussion about the quality of life, and that those conversations go beyond the life of the project. What we are now faced with COVID-19, the inability to go out and meet personally. And we recognize that. Just as we would normally be meeting with you all in person, we've come to the conclusion that in person meetings certainly yield highly effective outcomes. But in these times, if you choose to utilize this type of medium in order to engage with people, we're all we're certainly supporting it. We also are supporting it in general if this is one facet of how you can communicate with the community that's going to be important. Given um, the health edicts of every county, we may see that we move into a stage 3 or stage 4 at some point in time. Whether it happens before the deadline, we don't know. But if it does open the opportunity for you to have those additional meetings. And they can be in a way that is more traditional. We're not necessarily going to mandate that because we recognize that people may not be prepared and ready to go out and make the decision to engage in the way that they did in the past. But at the root of all of this is that we still need to make contact with people. We still need to engage with them. We still need to hear their ideas. And we still need to recognize that the communities that have been hit the hardest by this pandemic are the very communities that we all serve. So we can't walk away and we can't allow history, which history tends to suggest that as crises occur, we look for the easiest way to move about. And the easiest way is often to do nothing. We know the talent that is on this call. We know based upon what we've seen is that your basic tenets are about engaging people in the discussion. We recognize that this is going to be a challenge, but if you're going to use this medium or any type of medium that is video, we're asking that it not be just an announcement that it's going to be happening and an expectation that people will somehow figure out how they're going to engage. One, we want you to be able to think creatively and beyond the boxes that exist and make certain that if you're going to utilize this type of medium as a connector, that we have methods in place that ensure that people, one, have access, two, have an understanding of how to engage, and that we maximize the potential partnerships that might exist in those communities that didn't exist maybe 4 months ago. We know that in in-person meetings, there have been some highly effective um, meetings with youth in schools and with teachers and parents through the schools. Um, just 4 months ago, there was an unprecedented level of new technology being placed in the hands of our young people as schools are now doing video conferencing for their classrooms. It might be possible, as an example, to connect with the schools in your area to see if there can be an opportunity to make certain that this type of activity isn't blocked from their ability to engage, and then making certain that there is a way in which we can help make sure technology is one being utilized, but two understood, and that it can be utilized on multiple occasions. We're already hearing about new and creative ways in which we need to engage the public. It's just important that we know that we don't walk away from them, that we don't give up and say, we'll get back to it when times are better, mainly because history shows us that when that occurs, we not only step back, we step away from communities and then try to recover. And by that recovery, only gets us back to where we were years past. So we recognize that it's going to be a challenge. We recognize that we're going to be asking a lot of you, but what we don't want is the equivalent today to occur where a meeting is scheduled in a time where people can't get to it, where they can't be heard, where their voices are muted, and the opportunity for them to engage in a project discussion that's going to affect their lives for the next 30 years doesn't happen. We're open to figuring out how we can help you, assist you, and recognize the challenges that are before you. We want you to put your best foot forward. We just believe in our hearts that that can't be done without having some connection to the vision of the people you're serving. And their vision may have changed given the last 4 months of where we are. So we're asking a lot, we know, but the public is giving us $395 million to spend wisely. We get one shot to do this. We can't spend that amount of money on projects that didn't have the vision of the people that we're serving. We have to do that. So this is one way in which you can do that. The document that's before you gives you some additional ideas. We believe that more ideas are going to blossom as you embrace this and begin to look at ways um, to connect to community. We will be glad to share that with others. But most importantly, it's staying true to the roots of service. We can't forget those who need it the most. And all of us on this call have really committed ourselves to service and to serving those communities that have been underserved in the past. So that's kind of our thinking. Please, if you have comments or questions that you'd like us to address, we'd like for you to put those into the chat. In fact, I'm going to go to Victor right now to see if there are any questions, comments, or concerns right now, and then we'll also uh, revisit the chat room just before we start the next section after our break, and we'll answer questions at that time also. Victor, are there any um, messages in the chat?
Uh, Thank you, Cedric. So, so I think the uh, the critical question was from Thomas, and that is, how do we overcome the access electronic divide for community planning? Um, and that's really a key question. So this, as Cedric mentioned, this COVID-19 document, as you go, I'd really encourage you to read it in great detail later, after the webinar. It does provide a lot of research that we've discovered from talking to folks who've gone through this, as well as some good ideas. If you are unable to conduct in-person meetings based on either your local health guidance, or we've also heard cases where your own governing body or your own director is not allowing you to meet with the public in person at this time. If that's the case, we are saying on this page one here that it is your discretion. We are being flexible here. We understand these are unique times. We do encourage, and the key word here is encourage, meeting with the residents in person following the guidance provided on page two for social distancing, keeping your number of participants limited to maybe 10 people that can be spaced outdoors at the project site. You can have a great focus group for park design and get some great ideas when you have a small group at the project site. But if under no circumstances can you meet with people in person, Thomas is spot on. There is a technology gap. What we're doing today is, as Natalie mentioned, unusual compared to what we like to do, and that is see you in person and engage with you in person and draw from your energy and see your smiling faces, or try to turn your sometimes frowns upside down to a smiling face. And we love the engagement in person with you. And but pulling off a webinar like this takes a lot of prep work. We have about 8 different people that are having different roles to provide technical support. We've also as you've noticed, sent you a document to help you prepare for the webinar by making sure you know how to use the tools in advance and giving you links of how to use the tools. So these are all things that you should do for remote meetings. If you are using remote meetings, test the technology in advance, figure out what is the best for the community you're trying to reach. um, do your outreach, make sure that those residents are prepared to use that technology. And I want to really pick up and reemphasize something Cedric mentioned. It's a key point here. We've heard that using connections with a school is an effective way, because in many districts in high poverty areas, the school districts have actually provided not just a laptop, but also high-speed internet connection for their students. So one really effective approach may be to find a local teacher at a nearby school who's willing to make the park design process a class project. And it's a great way for that student to get engaged with the community, a great way for the teacher to give the students something exciting to do that's breaking the norm of what we're all going through. And because they have the connection through, they're typically using Zoom or some other type of webinar when they take tests and have class meetings. That's already set up. Now, the second thing that Cedric mentioned, I really want to reemphasize is that you can use younger people in the community, like teenagers, who know about social media, are using webinars and FaceTime and all these other technology, and you can have encourage teenagers to set up meetings where their family members are part of the meeting from their homes, so the teenager can help engage their parent, their legal guardian, maybe their grandparents, their younger children, and so the whole family can be part of that park design meeting through a webinar or through a phone conference or whatever technology you use, if you do decide to not meet with people in person. So I think that's a great tip that we picked up from some other folks that have gone through this recently, that are deeply committed to engaging their public. And so I hope that's helpful. And if not, we're here to help you throughout the process. Thank you.
Wanted to add to that, thank you for that, Victor. One of the things that is happening in communities around the state is that a lot of the NGOs and service providers are figuring out methods that they are connecting with community and still providing services. Expanding our palette of resources might be in order to look at how we serve community holistically, and then engaging with those to see if there is a way in which a team approach can be utilized. Um, so I want to encourage you to look at the community you're working with. No doubts, this is harder. We are honoring meetings that you've had in the past that have extending back to June of 2018. So those meetings are acceptable also. Meetings that you may have engaged in as you were doing the planning for your last meeting or last application. Um, Equally, we're also aware that many of you out there started the process in anticipation of a round 4 because you weren't prepared for round 3. And we know that meetings have been taking place um, throughout the time since the first round or the third round of applications were out there, and you've consistently and clearly been engaged in community. This is going to be more difficult. We're not going to sugarcoat it, but walking away from a community and saying, we'll figure it out and get back to them, because essentially that's what happens if their voices are not included in the process. We know it's harder, but they expect a lot from us. It's $390 million, almost $400 million that we're going to invest in community to help make it better. And we look at that as the beginning, not the end. We look at this as just the first step and working with community to ensure that they can thrive again. And finally, I just want to put out there that this is an opportunity for us to do something different. It is hard. We are going to be as flexible as we can be, and we will do whatever we can to be as flexible as necessary in order to get quality applications put forward. Um, they need us in community. They need each of you and the work that you do. Um, but if it was important to do it during the good times, it's even more critical to have that information now. Diversity and inclusion are not discussions that can happen only when we are able to have good times around us. This is the kind of the point in time where we have to dig a little deeper and figure out how we'll get there. Already we are hearing people with creative ideas, and we're very supportive of that.